And now on the line is Sheila Gilheany. Sheila is the CEO of Alcohol Action Ireland. Sheila, welcome back to Near FM.
Thanks very much for having me on, Darren.
Okay, our last interview on Near FM was just over 2.5 months ago, Sheila. I may be a bit late in getting around to interviewing you about this topic again, but this month, March, yourselves and Alcohol Action Ireland have been running a campaign on zero alcohol marketing in Ireland. Can you fill our listeners in more on this campaign, Sheila?
Surely indeed. So what we're actually looking to do is to address a loophole that has emerged within the Public Health Alcohol Act. So your listeners will know that that act was passed in 2018, and within it, it contained a number of, modest restrictions on the advertising of alcohol. And it was particularly keen, to do this to ensure a reduction in the amount of alcohol marketing that children would see. So, for example, there's a prohibition on advertising within 200 metres of a school or public playground. And more recently, there has been what's called a broadcast watershed, so that you can't show alcohol ads on TV before 9 p.m. But what we have found is that in these areas, that there's a proliferation of zero alcohol products being marketed. Now, our concern about that is that these products are using identical branding to the master brand. And we know actually from quite recent research that has actually just been published that when teenagers in particular see images of zero alcohol products, guess what? They start to think of alcohol. And that doesn't surprise us at all because, when a bus is whizzing by you, which is another area that is prohibited on, and you see something like a Heineken with a 0.0 tagged onto it, the image that's left with you is one of alcohol. It's of the Heineken, the brand that you see, as opposed to, perhaps a particular product. So we've been calling on the Minister for Health, Jennifer, excuse me, sorry,
Jennifer
apologies.
Carroll McNeil, isn't it?
McNeil, yes. Yes, excuse me, just a bit of a frog in the throat here, to close the loophole and to make explicit in the legislation what was always intended, that, the branding of alcohol would not be visible, or would the reduction of alcohol marketing would be the case, as was intended by the legislation, so that children would see less alcohol branding.
Okay, we are recording this interview on Friday the 28th, Sheila, and we'll be broadcasting Tony's programme on Sunday. You just mentioned it a minute ago, but just this week, yesterday, I think Thursday, it was announced that there had been some research in this area from a Flinders University in Australia. Can you tell me more about this, Sheila?
Certainly, this was very interesting research, and it's exactly just as we were, talking there. So basically, teenagers, 15 to 17-year-olds, were shown various images of soft drinks, of alcohol, and of zero alcohol products. And invariably, and they were asked, do these images make you think of alcohol? And invariably, when they were shown the images of the zero alcohol products, yes, it did make them think of alcohol. And that's adding to, other evidence that we have from Thailand, which is showing that these products are having a strong impact on young people's brand recognition.
And just a few months ago, I think it was yourselves, could be someone else, but I think yourselves did a analysis of a Six Nations rugby match, and there was literally, I believe, hundreds of ads for. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, so there's research that has been done through the University of Stirling, which actually looked at the field of play during some high-profile rugby matches. Now, the field of play is, again, another one of these areas where you're not supposed to see alcohol branding. And I'm not talking here about on the hoardings around the stand or even the sponsorship of the programme. I'm just literally talking about the grass, the field of play that's there. Well, what the University of Stirling found was that some of these high-profile matches, you were seeing alcohol brand references on the field of play once every 8 seconds. So you may think that you're watching, a rugby match, and indeed you will see a good bit of rugby, but you will also see a very large amount of alcohol branding. And this is particularly important, again, we come back to children, that we know that amongst the 7 of the top 10 programs that children will watch will be these high-profile sports occasions. So it is important that children's exposure to alcohol branding is reduced. And again, as I say, we are calling on the Minister to look at this, carefully. And we are presenting the evidence which is showing what common sense would tell you, that when you use identical branding to the master brand, you are promoting the overall brand. And indeed, we know that anyway. Actually, I was just looking at figures recently from Diageo in their annual report, and they pointed to their sponsorship of the Six Nations, which is again where you see an awful of this branding. And they do point to an increase, yes, in 0.0 sales, but also a substantial increase in sales of Guinness, the master brand itself. And basically the volume of that increase was much, much larger for the main product. So yes, these industries are promoting their products. We don't have a problem with that. But it is clear that in promoting both 0.0, they are also promoting their main brand as well.
Okay, this could be a side issue because I know it's not related directly to the Public Health Alcohol Act, but I read an article a few months ago in an Irish newspaper. I forget who wrote it now, but and the journalist was saying that a lot of rugby fans are complaining that a lot of people going to rugby matches, Six Nations, are young men in particular, and they're just getting drunk off their heads. Do you know anything about this, Sheila?
Well, there was funny enough, on the Liveline programme, Joe Duffy, indeed, after the first of the matches in the Aviva and the Six Nations, where there was many callers ringing in to talk exactly about that. Describing very unpleasant experiences. Some of it was irritation. People constantly getting up and down, to leave their seats. So that was annoying. People's pleasure in watching the match. To really quite disgusting things like, people literally being sick over, vomiting over people in the seats below. So none of these things are surprising. When you sell large volumes of alcohol, as Diageo indeed are proud to announce that they were selling large and increasing volumes of alcohol, there will be an outworking from that. And part of that outworking will be the harms, including disruption of people's pleasure and enjoyment of watching the match.
Like, what would you say to the Diageo argument and other alcohol companies' argument that they're doing nothing wrong in if they're advertising, including in the Six Nations, for a zero alcohol product, they're doing nothing wrong compared or in terms of the Public Health Alcohol Act?
Well, we think that the intent of the Act is very clear. It is to reduce children's exposure to alcohol branding. In fact, actually, it even defines alcohol advertising as the use of a logo or the brand of an alcohol producer. So, it may be that the letter of the law has not been broken, but clearly the spirit of the law has been broken. And, we can see in our own campaign, we were getting people actually to contact our TDs through our website. We've seen probably this, of all the various campaigns to be run, this has been something that really has touched a nerve with people, because I think anyone with any common sense is well able to see the cynicism that is at play here of this, workaround, on the advertising legislation. So all we're calling for is, I suppose, a restatement and make it absolutely explicitly clear in the legislation that products that are using identical branding to the master brand should be subject to the same restrictions from an advertising point of view as alcohol. And going back to the core thing here, this is about protecting children. And I think if we keep that in our heads, as the primary reason to be doing any of this, who wants to see children being exposed to alcohol branding? Certainly not the parents. Certainly not, I would say, the vast majority of our people. And we would know from our own polling on this matter that at least 70% of the population are keen to ensure that children are not exposed to alcohol advertising.
The alcohol industry in Ireland, Sheila, and around the world, it still is a formidable force when it comes to influence, I think, like politicians and particularly politics and business. It is a formidable industry in
Yeah.
terms of influence. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. This is a very powerful industry. There's no doubt about that. But I think it is important, for our government to remember who's in charge here, who sets the goalposts. This is a law that was democratically mandated by the people. It had overwhelming support across all political parties in the Dáil when it was passed. And let's just stand up for our children here. Let's ensure their protection. And look on it from that point of view. Nobody's talking about a ban on the products or a ban on advertising. We're simply talking about protecting children.
The main reason I got in touch with you for this interview, Sheila, is just as we were talking there about your campaign in the area of zero alcohol marketing. Our last interview on Air FM, though, Sheila, was in early January before the new government and programme for government had been revealed. Are there, can you tell me, Sheila, grounds for optimism in your point of view that the new government and Minister for Health, Jennifer Carroll McNeill, are going to be any good on public health alcohol policy over the next few years?
Well, in advocacy work, we always, really try to be as optimistic as we can. And one of the things that does give me hope is that in the programme for government, there was a commitment to ensuring effective regulation of alcohol in order to reduce alcohol consumption. So I would take it, as a starting off point. That's a good place to start. And if you look at, well, what do we mean by effective regulations? That really is talking about regulation on price, marketing, and availability. And we are seeing some progress in those sorts of regulations coming into play. But what is important is to make sure that whatever progress we have achieved to date isn't undermined by possibly other departments, looking to do things that will not be helpful. So in this regard, where I do have a concern is that on the one hand we have the Department of Health committing to effective regulation around alcohol, but there is also a commitment in the government to look again at alcohol licensing laws. So, we do have a concern about that. Nobody has a problem with streamlining, of alcohol licensing. I'm sure there's things that need to be done that, just from the minister's point of view that can be helpful there. But what we are concerned about is the possibility of extending licensing hours. So we will be, maintaining our own strong campaign that extending licensing hours is not a good idea. And actually, just recently we published a new report which looked at the safety of workers in the nighttime economy, because a significant degree of harm from alcohol arises to workers in that, whether we're talking about paramedics, healthcare staff, whether we're talking about bar staff, hospitality staff, or transport workers. There's significant evidence from multiple different jurisdictions that when you increase the sale of alcohol in the late night, you increase the harms to those workers.
And it was actually the Taoiseach and the last Taoiseach, Simon Harris, who led in the last couple of years on bringing in the Public Health Alcohol Act, wasn't it, Sheila?
Yes, so then Minister Simon Harris was Minister for Health. He was the person who brought the Public Health Alcohol Act to its fruition back in 2018. And, we appreciate that he would have done that. And I think very much gained significant awareness of the issues around alcohol. So actually, when he became leader Fine Gael last year, one of the first things that he did say back in April was that the sale of alcohol bill, this proposal to extend licensing hours, needed a second look. And we very much appreciated that. We have a new Minister for Justice who's now come in, Jim O'Callaghan, and we have been making the case to him that it is important that there isn't any increase in the licensing hours, not least because his department is also responsible for the strategy on domestic violence. And again, there's a very close linkage between increased alcohol sales and indeed increased licensing hours and domestic violence. One of the things that we have actually been pointing to is, some changes that occurred in Australia, because they found that when they reduced their late night drinking by 2 hours, they actually saw a decrease in reports of domestic violence, a decrease of 29%. So I think these are very important, issues when you have a department that is looking to reduce domestic violence. And all of us, I think, have been horrified by recent reports of, issues up to and including, the murders of a number of women, that we have to look at everything, every possible lever to try and reduce that level of violence.
A lot of people in the public would say that a lot of people, maybe even the majority of people, if their pub or club opens for an extra hour or two later, it's not going to make them violent or anything. But I do understand what you're saying, that there is, I believe, a substantial number of people, and the more alcohol they drink, the more troublesome they become. I think that's just a fact, really.
I think we can say with a large degree of confidence that the more alcohol that is consumed across the population, the more likely it is that there will be violence. And the converse is also true. The less that is consumed, the less violence that there will be. So we see violence in our street, and we see violence in our homes. And alcohol is an important element in both of those areas. It was interesting, actually, that the Minister for Health, was commenting recently on the spike in public disorder that occurs around St. Patrick's Day, and she was examining this from the point of view of the pressure that puts on EDs. And, and she was making the point that we needed to have more healthcare staff on duty at that time. And that's obviously true. But we would say we need to take it a step further. Let's actually try and reduce the pressure that's actually coming on EDs by reducing the amount of alcohol that is consumed over these big occasions like St. Patrick's Day.
And as part of that, would you be in favour of pubs and clubs having to close earlier than they currently close?
Well, again, we would always say let's look at the evidence on this, and certainly we would not be seeking to extend, licensing hours. And I think there is a case to be said, that when you look at, things like bank holidays, and indeed over Christmas, there was a particular spike in domestic violence reports. Well, then you really have to examine all of the conditions that are happening there. Just going back to Australia, another thing that actually has been looked at recently, this was a review that was announced by the Australian government to look at all their licensing and their laws around alcohol with a view towards trying to reduce domestic violence. And I would say, if we were to introduce any new changes to licensing laws through something like a sale of alcohol bill, that a primary reason for such legislation, and this should be written down, is with a view towards reducing violence. And I think that, when you keep that at the heart of, our regulations and our legislation on alcohol, I think that can only be a good thing.